Good morning, Bulldogs, and welcome to the 2021 Centennial High School Hall of Fame induction ceremony. The Centennial High School Hall of Fame is a select group of roughly 100 graduates of Centennial that have gone above and beyond in their lifetimes and have really shown what it truly means to be a Bulldog. Past inductees of the Centennial Hall of Fame have ranged from Tuskegee Airmen to FBI Special Agents, artists, musicians, and journalists, and even entrepreneurs, the most famous of which being Mr. David Packard of HP Computers and Printers, just to name a few. Not many schools anywhere around the world can say that one of their graduates was the owner of a Fortune 500 company and a billionaire, that's for sure. Due to the cancellation of the 2020 Hall of Fame induction class, due to the cancellation of the 2020 Hall of Fame induction ceremony, due to the pandemic, this year the Hall of Fame committee has decided to recognize 2 induction classes, being the 2020 Hall of Fame induction class and the 2021 Hall of Fame induction class. For each class, the Hall of Fame committee selects up to 3 members to be inducted, along with 1 recipient of the Brian McCartney Service to Centennial Award, an award which bears the name of the legendary Centennial principal, Mr. Brian McCartney. This year, as we induct both the 2020 and 2021 Hall of Fame classes, we are proud to welcome 6 new members into the Centennial High School Hall of Fame and 2 new recipients of the Brian McCartney Service to Centennial Award. Each individual, whom you will get to hear more about here shortly, have dedicated their time to bettering both the community and Centennial alike. They are prime examples of Bulldog excellence. We are happy that they could be here with us today. Please help me in congratulating this year's induction classes. Now, please stand and remove your hats for the presentation of the colors by the Centennial Jrotc Color Guard and under the direction of Major John Freeberg, and the singing of the national anthem by Centennial's very own Zola Cantor.
Color guard! Attention! Carry colors! Forward! March! Stick! March!
Thank you. Now, join me in welcoming our #1 Bulldog to the stage. Here's the current Centennial principal, Mr. Dave Craddock.
Welcome, Bulldogs past and present. I'm Dave Craddock, and it is my privilege to serve as the principal of the best high school in Pueblo, Colorado. It is an honor for me to participate in this honored tradition which celebrates amazing Bulldogs and their accomplishments. I would like to extend a sincere welcome to the families, friends, and colleagues of our honored guests who have come from near and far to celebrate with us today. Welcome also to our wonderful students and staff for being a part of this incredible celebration. Before we begin today's assembly, and as we celebrate Veterans Day, we want to extend a special thank you to the veterans in our community and our school, and to those of you here today. To us, you embody some of the best values, including duty, purpose, commitment, courage, and discipline. These are attributes that never go out of style and are important to model and share with every generation. Thank you for your service to our country, our community, and our school. You have our respect and sincere gratitude. Let's please give our veterans a round of applause. A special thank you to our student council, Ms. Shipley and Bulldog TV, Mr. Jacob Lewis, Ms. Pam Hope, my secretary, for their diligent work in putting on this assembly, and of course our wonderful students who will be leading it here in a few short minutes. Excellence has been a theme at Centennial for over 140 years, and today's Hall of Fame festivities highlight former Bulldogs that provide examples of what we mean when we say, as Bulldogs, we demonstrate excellence, honor, and the Bulldog way. Interesting that these words are in our belief statement as they convey the qualities it takes to be inducted into our esteemed Hall of Fame. The people selected to this distinguished fraternity have lived their lives in those heralded words and serve as important examples of what being a Bulldog represents. At this time, I would like to introduce the dedicated people who make up the Hall of Fame committee. Members, please stand and be recognized as I call your name. Mr. Bonnie Cosleon, Mrs. Pat Feckerly Farrell, Ms. Jo Hansen, Mrs. Laura Kelly, Mrs. Kathleen Kennedy, Dr. Jennifer Cottonsteady, Mrs. Ellen Reynolds, Mrs. Marge Mastrini, Mrs. Rita Romero, Mr. Mike Sexton, and Miss Wendy Shipley. Please give them a round of applause. Part of my duty each year at this assembly is to give you a brief criteria on what it takes to become a Hall of Fame member. Every year, the Hall of Fame recognizes 3 outstanding alumni. These alumni are chosen because they have made outstanding contributions in their professional careers, as well as their communities. Their nominations are representative of the outstanding citizenship and character that are part of the Bulldog way. The Service to Centennial Award is given to 2 individuals whose work here at Centennial was above and beyond the norm. Their work has left a lasting impression on past, present, and future Bulldogs. And next, for our students in here, I believe it'll show on the board, this is an interactive assembly. So let me make sure I'm on the right. Thank you to all of our current Bulldogs in the audience today helping us celebrate our inductees. We have a fun and interactive activity for you to participate in while you're attending this assembly. Instead of just sitting and listening, we're going to ask you to participate. So, Bulldogs, you don't hear this often, but please take out your cell phones and follow the instructions on the screen so you can participate in real time while our inductees are being interviewed by our amazing student council's students. A reminder to all, please silence your cell phones while you are participating, and we encourage all of you to get in the spirit and help us by participating with your cell phones. And there it is right up there. Thank you, Pam. All right, let's get this celebration started. It is my distinct honor to introduce to you the 2020 and 2021 Hall of Fame inductees. First, Mr. Anthony Smith, class of 1979. Would you please come to the stage? Mr. Christopher Smith, class of 1988. Representing Christopher today is the Hall of Fame nominator, Mr. Doyle Cooper, who will be accepting the honor on Christopher's behalf. Troy Rink, class of 1989. And Ms. Carolyn Glovinski, I knew I practiced it all day. Glovinski. Close enough? I'm so sorry. I practiced that. Come on up. Class of 1971. Our next inductee is S. Bruce Elson, class of 1941. Our next inductee is Glenn Narton, class of 1975. And our next inductee will be William Hobbs, Brian Mccartney Service to Centennial inductee. And our last inductee is Mr. Tom Brockman, Brian Mccartney Service to Centennial inductee, and on a personal note, a friend and mentor. Brockman. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to our amazing students to begin the assembly. Students, don't forget to get out your cell phone, get entered and participate. And I'm going to turn it back over to our awesome student body president, Mr. Greg Recipients. Greg, take it away.
Now, it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our first two inductees this morning, who would have happened to be brothers, but unfortunately one could not make it today. In his place, we have Mr. Doyle. Please come up to the table. Mr. Smith and Mr. Doyle. Mr. Anthony James Smith, after his graduation from Centennial in 1979, Tony, as he's called, attended the U.S. Air Force Academy, where he graduated with and served with distinction for 22 years. As a command pilot, he led the first operational B-1 mission to Kuwait and flew the first lead aircraft for the first ever around-the-world mission in the B-1 bomber. He completed his Air Force career as Deputy Chief and retired in 2005. In 1995, Smith was assigned to the staff of the National Air Guard in Washington, D.C., and then the Randolph AFB in Texas, where he spent 5 years in the 37th as the 37th Branch Chief and Assistant Director of Operations for the 559th Flying Training Squadron. His outstanding skills and leadership earned Captain Smith the position of Flight Commander in the 37th Bomb Squadron. His reputation for leadership and tackling challenging situations with skills and intelligence is widely affirmed. Mr. Christopher Allen Smith graduated in 1988 from Centennial and must have loved education. For all of his working life, he served as an educator. Having earned his master's degree in curriculum development, he served many roles in various schools across the state. And at the peak of his career, was named District Chief of the staff of the Cherry Creek School District, which served 55,000 students. While an elementary school teacher, he was named Outstanding Teacher for 3 years in a row. His commitment has always been to help students find their path, whether through coaching, mentoring, or leading. His reputation as a respectable leader throughout the state is well known. Now, I'm going to start with you, Mr. Smith, or Mr. Smith, I suppose. Being that you achieved the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Air Force, what would you say prompted you to join the Air Force in the first place?
It's not a sexy story, but I was looking to go to college, and I didn't have any money. And so the Air Force said, hey, if you go to the Air Force Academy, we'll give you a job afterwards, and we'll pay you to go to school instead of you paying us. So signed up.
Tough times even back then, I guess. Huh? When you were in charge of the training squadron, what did that feel like?
That was actually one of my favorite assignments. I was in Columbus, Mississippi, and getting towards the end of my career, I had one more assignment after that. But I had the opportunity to work with a lot of young kids that were just coming out of college and going to pilot training. And also, I had a lot of instructor pilots that were working for me too. So it was a great opportunity to kind of mentor young kids and young Air Force officers and pilots. So it was a lot of fun.
Was it stressful being in charge of so many people?
Yes.
More stressful than being on stage right now?
Yeah, more stressful than that. I was at that assignment, actually, kind of not a funny story, but during the 9/11 attacks, and we launched maybe 50 sorties a day, every day, training pilots, and that was the first time that the whole airspace of the United States was shut down, which was kind of an interesting thing, getting 50 airplanes back on the ground in 5 or 10 minutes.
Well, That certainly isn't a funny story. Taking like a journey back to your time at Centennial, what extracurricular activities were you part of?
Mostly athletics. I was a wrestler here. I played football here. Played baseball for a little bit. They didn't like me, so. And then I wasn't involved in a lot of clubs per se, but I enjoyed academics as well. So I took a lot of those courses, but mostly.
I assume you were a star wrestler then?
I was okay.
You were at least the starting quarterback, right?
No, I played defense mostly.
Well, that's interesting. That's the position I played. If you could give any advice to the students in the crowd, what advice would you want to give them?
I guess I would say, based on my experience, if you have an opportunity, go out and see the world. Go out and see the country. Go somewhere else. Meet new people. Get their points of view on different things. I've lived. When I graduated from the Air Force Academy, I moved at least every 3 years for the next 25 years. So I got to see a lot of the country. I got to meet a lot of different people, and it was just an invaluable experience. Not to say that Pueblo's bad, but you can always come back, and it's just great to meet different people and see their perspective.
From what I'm hearing from that, I should get my tail out of here as soon as I graduate. Moving on to you, Mr. Doyle.
Mr. Cooper.
Sorry, Mr. Cooper, I'm sorry. How did you know the other Mr. Smith?
I was introduced to Tony as his coach as a freshman, and I coached here at Centennial for a number of years. I coached football and wrestling, and I started teaching here when this school opened in 1973. I had just got back from Vietnam, and I did my student teaching at the old building downtown under two legends, Boy Frakes and Sam Dazio. And if you had the chance to meet those individuals, trust me, you will learn a lot. And from that, that's how I came to be introduced to Tony, to be introduced to Chris, teaching here for 17 years.
You certainly do look wonderful for your age. So, knowing Chris at the time, was there any standout qualities about him, or did he certainly feel like he was a student?
One of the things that I tried to get into Chris's mind, he did not have to follow after Tony. He could make his own journey. I had 4 older brothers, and I used to get compared to my 4 older brothers when I was in school. And trust me, it's not an easy job. So I tried to make sure that he stayed his own individual.
Was there a sense of rivalry between the two?
All families have rivalries.
In fairness, it wasn't a competition.
I'll make sure he hears that.
It sounds like Chris really was quite the character if he wasn't a competition for you.
Well, one of the things about Chris, when I was introduced to Chris, I was the media specialist here at Centennial. And when you have a student working for you in the media center, there's a lot of times that you can talk about home, you can talk about your future and things like that. And that was one of the things that impressed me most about Chris was his willing to meet those challenges.
Wow, that certainly does sound very impressive. I do wish he was here. It would have been great getting to talk to
It
him.
would have been very good.
Was he a very sociable person?
Well, I haven't been with him that much over the past 30 years, so.
Well,
But one of the things, I volunteer down at the Center for American Values, and Cherry Creek, where Chris is working, they bring students down to Pueblo, Colorado to hear about the Home of Heroes.
I am very proud of our Home of Heroes.
As I am.
Perhaps you have any stories about your brother when you growing up?
I have a few, but he wouldn't want me to tell you.
Well, lastly, do you have any advice for our students in the crowd tonight?
Find something that you love and run with it. I was fortunate enough to teach for 36 years in this district, and even after I finished and retired, through the Center for American Values, I am still teaching. And it's important for our young people to know what made this country what it is.
Thank you very much, both of you, for coming up here today. Once again, give it up to your first two Hall of Fame inductees, Mr. Anthony. Now, here's Bulldog TV Jr., Michelle Bettram, with your next two inductees.
Good morning, Bulldog students, alumni, and other guests. My name is Michelle Buttram, and it is my pleasure to announce our next two inductees this morning. I'll first start off with Mr. Troy Edward Wright. Wright's successful journalism career began as a high school student at Centennial, where he was a distinguished scholar, serving as the editor of the school newspaper, while also serving as a three-sport athlete in golf, basketball, and baseball. Following graduation in 1989, Wright worked in various journalism roles, including a time at Brockman Sports as a national NFL columnist. The launch of his career was earning the position as the beat writer for the Colorado Rockies for the Denver Post and MLB.com. He became well known and often appeared on talk shows and television. This led to serving as the writer for the Denver Broncos, covering the Super Bowl 50 victory, and he was then welcomed by Denver's Channel 7 as the Bronco Insider. His followers number in the tens of thousands. In 2019, he earned Broadcaster of the Year award. With a passion for mentoring others, Wright often volunteers his time as a coach and even took several teams to state championships. His positive contributions to his community earned him a recognition in the top 100 people of Longmont, Colorado. Next, I'd like to introduce our next inductee, Ms. Carolyn Susan Glovinski, and her sister Marilyn, who will be receiving her award for her this morning. And I would also like to acknowledge that Carolyn's husband is here to honor her as well. Carolyn Susan Glovinski, PhD, was a Pueblo native and died of cancer just before her 66th birthday. After graduating Centennial in 1971, she went on to pursue a PhD in medical psychology. Her PhD work became well known, and she was invited to England to present at a prestigious conference. Her work focused on research, and she worked with talented mentors and shared her findings with many. In time, she returned to Colorado and held teaching positions at CSU Pueblo and Colorado College, often working to advance in their nursing programs. As a talented educator, she became a founding faculty member at Rocky Vista University in Parker and joined the faculty of Roseman University Medical High School. Her passion has always been students, and she enjoyed the challenge of making learning fun and easy for her students. Now it's time to get those phones out, Bulldog, and direct your attention to the screen. So, you have to vote here. Can you tell which of the following is Troy Wright's 1989 senior annual photo? C is winning. I can't believe no one voted for D. I do believe that C is the correct answer. Now let's take another vote and see if you can tell which of the following photos is Carolyn Glovinski's 1971 senior photo. Again, D is looking pretty promising. Okay, can we have both our inductees come to the table, please? It's great to have you all here. I'll start with Mr. Troy Wright. I would like to ask you, how old were you when you discovered that journalism was something you wanted to pursue a career in?
First, how are you guys doing today? You doing all right? Yeah, these things are so quiet. We can actually smile and have some fun. This is a cool day. I've been back here in a long time. I knew I was going to be a journalist probably by 8th grade because unless I was going to be a jockey, I wasn't going to be a professional athlete. So I had a much better chance to write about sports and talk about sports than I was to play them professionally, which was, I guess, every kid's dream when I was growing up. So I would say 7th, 8th grade was when I realized that I wanted to be a journalist.
Wow, that's early on. Have you had any goals that have seemed unattainable in your life? And if so, how did you push through that and continue to work towards that?
Well, motivation is a critical thing. I mean, one of the reasons I love about sports is you get challenged daily.
Right.
You get told you can't do things, and you can accept that and decide that that's your fate, or you can do something about it. And having coached kids that are part of my adult life, my father was a coach, my mom worked every day, you learn the discipline of, if you don't, in sports we have to say, if you don't like it, play better. If you don't like your circumstance, do better. And so there was a time in my life I wanted to work for Sports Illustrated. When I was growing up, I had a subscription to Sports Illustrated, I think when I was 6 or 7 years old. I loved to read, and it never happened. But as it turned out, it was the best thing that didn't happen because I ended up eventually going to the Denver Post, which led me to covering the Rockies, the Broncos, and then now being able to do TV journalism, which is a great gig. So the way I got over it is you just put your head down and you decide and make it a competition. And it's not that you have to stay humble, but you have to decide if this is something you want. Because once you play the victim and make an excuse, you're not going to achieve your goal. Doesn't mean you're always going to reach your goal, but if you decide it's what you want and dedicate your passion to it, the chances of you reaching it increase dramatically.
Right, that's awesome. That's a great mindset. You've had many amazing accomplishments throughout your career, such as being the NFL columnist. What would you say is the accomplishment you're most proud of?
That's an interesting question. Getting to the Denver Post became a goal when I was in, because when you work in journalism, you go through the minor leagues. And my first job out of college, after being at the University of Colorado, was in Lake Havasu City. And the biggest thing in Lake Havasu City was they added a stoplight and a red robin when we were there. My wife, Leanne, and my kids weren't there then, but I went from there to Yuma, Arizona, and then Longmont, and then since we've lived there since. But my biggest accomplishment, there's two things. One was being able to chronicle the Colorado Rockies' journey to the World Series in 2007. There's never a second first. So being the one and to write a book about it and their journey to the World Series will forever be a wake-up and pinch-me moment that I was blessed enough to be able to chronicle that. The second thing would be to go into TV at age whatever I was in my 40s out of the blue, have someone say, we want you to be on TV with no TV training, and say, I remember talking to my youngest son in Atlanta at a baseball tournament. So what do you think? Should he do this? And he is more of a risk taker. He said, absolutely. I don't think he understood the risk. But it's going into TV and being able to make a career at TV. It was totally out of the blue. It was a complete left turn later in life. I think that might be the most thing I'm proudest of because it was just such an unusual circumstance.
Right, that is pretty awesome. And lastly, do you have any advice that you would like to give to the Centennial students here today?
Yeah, I mean, I have my oldest son is here, he's 23, my youngest is in college in Santa Barbara playing baseball, and so they're not a lot older than you guys, and I've coached kids your age is growing for the last 15 years. One thing I would tell you, and one of our other guests said this, follow your passion, because if you end up working in something that you're passionate about, it doesn't feel like work, number one. Secondly is, don't be afraid once in a while to get out of your phone and talk to people. You've lost interpersonal communication skills, and I would be driving kids around the country in baseball, they'd all be sitting in the same car texting each other at the same time, not talking. You can talk, it's okay. You will learn more about people through conversation than texting. So don't be afraid once in a while to have a conversation. And the last thing would be, you have to have humility to reach your success, but don't let people tell you you have to do things certain ways. You're all unique. My path through journalism it wasn't standard, it was different. So don't let someone tell you that you can't do it just because you're not following the dance steps of ABC. So find your passion, find what you like to do, because once you do, you won't feel like you're working. You'll be happier, and when you're happier, life's cool.
For sure, that's great advice. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Carolyn Glovinski, and her sister Marilyn will be doing the interview questions. First off,
I'll share with Bob.
okay, sounds perfect. First off, we would like to extend our deepest sympathies for your sister Carolyn.
Thank you.
If she was here today, how do you think she would be feeling right now?
She'll be feeling very honored.
Yeah.
She loves Centennial. She loves Pueblo. Our lives here growing up were wonderful, full of values. I think that's something that Pueblo and Centennial always exemplify. And she was very accomplished. I mean, she said she sort of followed her passion, and her passion was medicine and physiology and teaching it to the students and the students themselves. I mean, all you students out there, she really loved being with you. It was what made her get up every morning.
How do you feel about your wife's accomplishment in the field of education?
I couldn't be more proud of her accomplishments. She was an excellent educator. She was able to instill enthusiasm in her students and interest in the work. You know, some of this physiology and all that can be kind of difficult to get through.
Right, that's an awesome trait to have. Looking back to when you and Carolyn were younger, do you have any stories or fond memories that you would like to share?
Centennial. I remember the old Centennial, okay, the old building. It was kind of rickety. I remember being in the balcony during assemblies just like this. And this balcony was held up by gallows that were about that thick. And doing cheers there, and everyone stomping. And Carolyn just always took her values as far as her influence. So she took Pueblo values to people who didn't have them, and she was very authentic. To use one word to describe her, it's authentic.
And for either of you, if she had one piece of advice to share with Centennial students today, what do you think it would be?
One thing would be what you've already heard about, pursuing your passion. And to try to find what really motivates you and what you really enjoy doing. And like he was saying, if you find that, work won't be work.
Right.
And she put in hours and hours just because she was so devoted and so involved in what she was doing.
I think, she would say that the measure of your value is going to be your contribution, whatever it is. So put your heart in it, speak from your heart, and excel and take yourself as far as you can.
That's great. Thank you both so much. Once again, give it up for your second to Hall of Fame inductees. Senior Austin Chase to introduce our next induction.
Quick intermission. This announcement's for our student body and our faculty. This assembly will run into next hour. All the students in here are fine. Please do not leave if you hear the bell. We'll conclude the assembly. Teachers that need to go, please, when the bell rings, sneak out. And we're going to continue with our festivities. Thank you.
Good morning, Bulldogs. My name is Austin Chase, and it's my honor to introduce our next two Hall of Fame inductees this morning. First is Mr. S. Bruce Elson. Pueblo native, Elson has spent his life in service to others, including a stint with the U.S. Army from 1943 to 1946 during World War II. Graduating in 1942, he returned many times to Centennial High School to work with teachers and students. One of his passions was sharing history of the war with students as he displayed artifacts from the bombing at Hiroshima, Japan, in a riveting presentation that was seen throughout southern Colorado. Elson is the father, grandfather, and great-grandfather of several Centennial graduates, and his wife Mary, now deceased, served as the school secretary for 20 years. His love for Centennial and students is evident. Now, I'd like to introduce our next inductee, Mr. Glenn Narden. Glenn W. Narden is best known for his love of music, having played as a student with the Pride City Marching Band, along with Centennial's marching band. He carried his talents with him to the Continental Army Band, where he led the woodwind section. His dedication to duty earned him a promotion to warrant officer, where he took command of the 434th Army Band, the 77th Army Band, and the 1st Cavalry Division Band, which was honored to perform to more than 150,000 service members during Operation Iraq Freedom. After a 35-year musical military Army career, Narden retired from the Army as a Chief Warrant Officer 4, but continues to provide leadership to community programs and young adults in his community. And now, for one more time, let's look back to the polls, Bulldogs. Taking a look at the screen behind me, which would you say is Mr. Elson's 1941 senior? Come on, nobody thinks he's
Nope.
Next, which of these would you say is Glenn Narden's 1975 senior yearbook photo? No, it's a lot of people. It's a lot of people. Now, without further ado, please can join me in congratulating our next two inductees. Let's get to know them a little bit better. Start with Mr. Elson. First of all, it's not every day that you get to meet a World War II veteran like yourself, so thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
If you could describe it, to everyone in the audience today, what was life like back in the 1940s when you graduated high school?
Well, first of all, I would say go Bulldogs, and secondly, I would like to have been, when they posted the flag, had as much agility and control getting up here. But anyway, the question again?
If you could describe it to everyone in the audience today, what was life like back in the 1940s when you graduated from high school?
Well, I graduated in 41, and of course the Great Depression was on that at that time, and when I attended Centennial, I was in the ROTC as a lieutenant, and the Army furnished our uniforms, Army uniforms, and so we wore those 4 days a week, and then the 5th day, whatever you wanted to wear. But it was a great asset to my parents at that time when money was hard to get. That it saved them from buying clothes for us all at that time, and nearly every male student at that time was in the ROTC.
Sounds like a very common thing. So in my research into your life, I read that you actually visited Hiroshima just 2 months after the dropping of the atomic bomb. Could you describe what that experience was like for you?
I certainly can. I'll never forget that. After the instrument of surrender was signed with Japan on the battleship Missouri with General MacArthur, they picked us up. I was in the Philippines where I spent my time liberating, and so they come to pick us up, and after the signature on the instrument of surrender, and took us to a big naval base called Curry. And so we made a tactical landing there with our M1s with no ammunition, and then marched down to where we were going to stay. And then one afternoon, Saturday afternoon after parade and inspection, about 10 of us was standing in a group, and a guy come by, and 6 by, and said, "Anybody would like to go to Hiroshima?" "Yeah, we sure would." And so 10 of us jumped in the back, and it was about a 30-minute ride to Hiroshima. And we kept looking for the damage, and we couldn't see anything. And finally, we went through this gate, and it was the whole city was surrounded by a wooden fence like you have in your homes today. And so we entered in, and then as far as we could see, it was nothing but disaster. I wrote to my wife that night that it looked like somebody took a big sledgehammer and just beat everything to pieces. And as I look back at the wall, the gate, the wooden wall, it was just charred black, like that's where the bomb stopped. So then, therefore, I just started looking, kicking rubble around, and I picked up a sake bottle that was melted and disordered, and then also I wore glasses at that time, and since a little guy, and I was kicking around looking for something else. And when I went to the ophthalmologist, he had a cabinet about this long, this wide, and at the beginning of this place it was just rims, and then the other half was lenses. And so I was fitted by, he put the rims on, and is this good or is this better? And that's the way I got glasses. And then I was kicking around, and I saw that very same thing laying at my feet, and all the rims and the glass was all melted into one sheet. So sorry, I couldn't get anything broken there or bring back. And I'll never forget that moment, and the destruction, and just hope and pray this world can get along without any more of that.
During your time in the Army, what was the highest rank that you ever had?
Well, I was a buck sergeant, and in the Army Air Force. And then the Battle of the Bulge, sergeant and below where I was at got transferred to the infantry. And so they took away the top stripe, and I was determined they never going to take any more. So I had to prove to them that I was just as good a infantryman as I was an Air Force person. And so that's the highest rank I got, and lucky they didn't take that second stripe away.
In all these years since you were a student here at Centennial, what's one thing that you miss most about going to school here every day? What's one thing you miss most? What's one thing you miss about coming to school here every day? What's one thing you miss about your time?
Well, it was a great part of my life, that's all I can tell you. I never will forget all the good teachers that I had, and how great it was to be in the ROTC, and I was in the ROTC rifle bit. We had actually 22 caliber rifles, and we practiced that, and we beat the rifle team here in Pueblo, the men that were still here. We beat them, and we went to state and placed second place in the rifle shooting, and with Sergeant Thompson that drove us up there in an Army vehicle. So that was a big high point in my life. And then all the great friends that I met here at school, and there was 244 classmates that I had here in school, and the best calculation I can give, there's just 3 of us living, and Marge Cruz was one of them. With her folks were a part of Cruz Bakes here in Pueblo, and Dr. Aldo Batista, an orthodontist here, and myself. And as far as I know, that we're the only 3 still living.
And lastly, if you had any advice you'd like to share with our current Bulldogs today, what would that be?
Well, I certainly appreciate seeing all of you that are in the ROTC here, and I hope that you still have that desire to serve this country after you graduate and go to college. And most colleges have an ROTC program, and you can come out as a second lieutenant and learn to fly. I'm a docent out at the Pueblo Air Museum on every Saturday, and where DOS flying is out there, and they come to visit and go through. And no matter what branch that you might be at that time, you still have the opportunity to go there and learn to fly if that's your desire.
Thank you, Mr. Elson. Next, we're going to ask you some questions, Mr. Norden. So, how would you say performing in the 77th Army Band, the 434th Army Band, and the 1st Cavalry Division affected you?
Well, first of all, you put me to follow a member of the greatest generation on Earth.
I'm sorry,
And you notice you just dropped the mic.
I did not.
So show is over, folks. I have tremendous respect for the generation who fought in World War II. I fought 2 years in Iraq, and I've told a lot of people that I don't know how you did it, because we had satellites covering where the enemy was. We had bulletproof things that either on the tanks or on our vehicles or on ourselves. We had arms that you didn't have back then that shot more perfect, more incredibly perfect. And we came back with wounded and all of the disastrous things that happened in the war. But look at this gentleman who could speak of those days of the worst period in America, and yet he's here to tell the good stories, the good things about it, and looking forward to the future. This is the kind of example that everybody should have, right here. What was the question? But I know what the question was. The greatest thing about being a part of the military bands is that you do get to follow some of the same things that I did just across the hall over here, but also on the stage here and outside on the street, and everything that you perform and do in high school you were able to build on that. And that is the most incredible thing. I even got to try out a lot of stupid things here. I got to act, which I played a really dumb character and I got fired. And that was in the summer show. And one time, I just got to tell you, I don't know if the practice rooms are still over there, little glass areas right next to, between the choir and the band. Well, I got this great idea, and I said, let's make money for the band fund, okay? And what we'll have is called a cram jam. We'll try to cram as many people in one of those little rooms over there, and have people wander around through there, and then, give a number of how many people they think are actually in there. So I talk people into doing this. This is all a part of what it's like to be in the military. You talk people into doing things, and I actually had everybody crammed in there until one big kid came in. It turned out he was really smelly. And everybody just vacated that room, and my big money-making deal was over. But, high school is where it all starts, that crazy stuff. You learn the crazy stuff, and then you find out what works and what doesn't work. And then when you become a bandmaster for the United States Army, you end up becoming not just a band director, you become a musician first, and then you're a band director, but you're also a producer. I produced recordings, quite a few recordings. You're also really a manager of players, because you have to take care of your people, and you get personally involved in all your people, no matter how big a unit is. And when you do all of this, you also take it to a foreign land and do the same thing. You do it over in some place that God knows where you're going to go. But it's the same principles, and you keep building on it, and it's a wonderful thing to know.
Well, I'm in performing arts, and I can say I've seen my fair share of crazy stuff myself.
You haven't seen me.
That is very true, I have not.
Just ask my famous friend Pat Halloran, if anybody ever heard of him. He'll tell you.
All right, so my next question. If you could give any future musicians advice, myself included, what would you tell them? And do you ever feel any nostalgia seeing young musicians today, given the incredible career you've had in music?
Oh, I'll answer the last ones first. I just happened to watch a YouTube video of a saxophone player who's, I think, 17, and absolutely incredible player. And I sent that thing to a few of my friends. I said, this is why I'm not playing anymore. The younger generation has had so much opportunity to be greater than what we have. The materials were only being written when I was at your age. And those kind of things are absolutely phenomenal today compared to what we had way back. It was just a basic thing. YouTube and all kinds of things teach. And what was the first half? I forgot.
If you could give any future musicians advice, myself included.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Let me tell you, don't be a specialist. Some people play the clarinet. Some people only sing. Some people do this. But if you want to be in music, you need to move out and know all the facets of how everything in the music world works. Play more instruments, sing more parts, do more things, act and sing, and be a part of choruses and quartets and duets, and continue to work toward understanding music. And of course, a degree will help you, but I had a lot of friends in the Army who didn't get a degree, and to this day I've never played as well as they did. But you have to know music inside and out. You have to know stage production. You need to know stage performance. And by knowing all of that, you could do what I did, but it was a long, long process of learning all that. And I'll give you an example. When I went to school here, I used to watch Bob Hope do the Christmas shows every year in Vietnam. And he'd been doing this since World War II. Every conflict, taking movie stars and having a great show and entertaining the troops. And it was always a thing that I wanted to do, but I'm not going to be Bob Hope. I'm not going to be some movie stars. I'm not going to be So who am I going to be? Well, I get over to Iraq, and in 2004, the USO that sponsored Bob Hope brought the first show to us in Baghdad. And at the camp, I heard that they were coming, and they did, of course, didn't need my band. They bring their own musicians, they bring whatever they need. And I said to myself, I said, this is not going to happen. I'm going to be a part of this show. So I started lobbying. That's another thing you do, is you lobby for what you want, and you show your passion, like someone else said. And by golly, they gave me 15 minutes. They gave me 15 minutes before the show. Well, I already knew that in Iraq, everything ran like an hour and a half late. You never knew the weather or the enemy or whatever it was. And when I went back to my band hall where my guys were, I said, you're going to play for the USO show, and you're going to prepare for an hour and a half. Sure enough, my guys entertained. You see the large audiences that Bob Hope used to have. Well, they didn't televise this, but it was one of those times where you just had a big sea of people, all dressed in desert camouflage. And then the greatest thing was, it turns out, you know, one of my biggest heroes was in the first show, John Elwood. And here I had brought my band to play for, really, as far as I was concerned, the guy who led Colorado in football. And the things that come together where you started in high school come to a fruition way up there. You have no idea what you could get into, but by being open to the many areas of life in the music or in the performing world, you could be there when it happens.
Well, that definitely sounds like an awesome experience to have.
Yeah, by the way, the show leader, the top name was Robin Williams, who also led the show. And I stood on the stage with my band with the guys, so you don't get those chances that often.
I would definitely be honored to do that. My next question is, what would you say has been your favorite type of music to play?
I've always gone for jazz in all its different facets. And because jazz, the top Army band that plays in Washington, D.C. has its own jazz band. And I think it was them who explained this to me. The only true form of music in this world, in America rather, the only true form of an American form is the blues. I mean, it is a traditionally black song that became black music that we adopted for everyone in America, and it goes through all genres now, from country to rock to you name. But they always keep a jazz band as their special thing, because jazz is American.
Well, my sister is in the jazz band here, so I don't do jazz.
Keep practicing.
I will. Do you have a favorite memory of your time as a student at Centennial High School that you'd like to share?
My memory of a favorite student?
Do you have a favorite memory of your time as a student?
As a student. Well, I told you about one of the crazy times, but I'll tell you what whenever I remember good times here, I always remember, I wasn't necessarily a choral person, I was more instrumental, but with the opportunities I get to work with Mr. Ken Butcher over here in the choral department, and Mr. Holder, who was in the drama department. Those two men probably instilled more in my life, in the little I got to work with them, than any two teachers here on this faculty. And whenever I look back, all my moments are associated with those two gentlemen.
Those two areas are definitely my forte.
Yes, they are. And if you don't know those two guys, you need to meet them.
And lastly, did you have any words of wisdom to share with the student body that's here today?
Yes, just like I have a wonderful, terribly good, I guess, if that makes any sense, understanding of the greatest generation, I would like to say that you need to know every generation that is above you. And you need to have the confidence to be able to go to them and ask them for information. Whatever that information should be. But every generation ahead of you has experience that you don't have. And if you want to be better than the generation before you, you've got to know what the generation was doing all the way back. All the way back when America was just a small place and we were not the leader in the world. This gentleman was in the fight for this country. We have led this world for all these years. Take their experience, take it and run it. We want you to have our experiences and know what we did and what we failed at, especially so you don't fail at it again. Don't repeat the fails, take our successes and run. That's what I want to see this generation do.
Thank you, Mr. Norton. Once again, give it up for our favorite student Mr. Vice Police Officer for Mr. Glenn. Now to introduce our two Brian McCartney Service to Centennial Award recipients this morning, here's Bulldog TV sophomore Isaiah Ortiz.
Thank you, Austin. Good morning, Bulldogs. I'm Isaiah Ortiz, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our 2020 and 2021 Brian McCartney Service to Centennial Award recipients. Your 2020 Brian McCartney Service to Centennial Award winner is Mr. William Hobbs. Next, your 2021 Brian McCartney Service to Centennial recipient is Coach Tom Brockman. I'd now like to invite the both of you to join me at the front of the stage so we can all get to know you a little bit. Oh wait, my bad. Can I just read something before you? My bad. So starting off with William Bill Hobbs, a father of 3 boys, seemed to understand the important role that sports can make in a child's life. Although working in a medical office for his career, he spent nearly all his free time and dedication to sports at Centennial, serving as the head athletic trainer on 2 different tenures for a combined total of 21 years. He is known for setting high standards and expectations in the training room. Much of his time serving Centennial was as a volunteer, covering many games, traveling with the football team, covering practices, and working many sporting events. His reputation as a professional, hard worker, and a man of integrity are hard to match. And now for Coach Brockman. He is a well-known name in the Pueblo community for a number of reasons, but mostly because literally hundreds of students have been coached by this dedicated teacher and coach over his 33 years at Centennial High School. His most notable years were when he served as the head coach of the Bulldogs beginning in 1981. Throughout the 19 years, he led the Bulldogs to the state playoffs in 13 seasons, won numerous league titles, and eventually won the state championship in 1987 and 1992. He is the winningest football coach in Pueblo's history. If service to Centennial is a qualifier, this man certainly fills those shoes well. Now you can go up there. So, starting off a question for Mr. Hobbs. Given that your profession could get pretty stressful at times, how did you ease that stress in tough times, especially when you had to jump into action helping an injured player?
Talk about a tough question. But each situation lended to its own answers and questions and actions. Covering all all the sports that the school offered was a challenge, with football being the busiest. The only thing that I can say is I handled it with faith and my background and my education and my training and everything that I knew, I tried to call on, and to always to look for someone else that knew something that I didn't and find out what they would do.
And then now for a question for you. You were the head football coach here at Centennial between 1981 and 1999. During that time, you were able to bring home 2 state championships, one in 1987 and one in 1992. And you earned yourself the title of the winningest football coach in Pueblo history, a record that stands to this day. What would you say your leadership and coaching philosophy was, and what traits made you and your team so successful?
Well, first of all, I've been vaccinated twice. I've had the booster, and I answered negative to all the COVID questions. So hopefully, while I'm answering this question and others, you people will not be quarantined for over a week. Question again?
What would you say your leadership and coaching philosophy was, and what traits made you and your team so successful?
Well, I know I do. I have some of my former football players in the audience today. And I think probably one of the things that has stood out over the years, everybody said Coach Brockman is a disciplinarian. And I was a hard ass. And the thing was that we wanted, as a coaching staff, we wanted to make it, we wanted to truly make it difficult for our kids in the practice field. And we felt that if they can get through certain things, they were going to be a lot better off when they showed up for game time on a Friday or a Saturday. And based on what he just got done saying as far as my career, as far as the Centennial football program is concerned, it did. It truly worked. And the thing that I can always remember is the Centennial kid didn't shy away from hard work. I don't care if you were white, brown, black, or what, they got after it. And they wanted something at the end, and we did. We got quite a few things to be proud of over the years. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. I personally like learning about, coaches' philosophies and stuff like that, so it's definitely an honor about yours, so thank you, I appreciate it. And now another question for you. What trait in yourself would you say made you a reliable resource in the eyes of the students you served during your time here at Centennial?
Who wrote these questions? I think probably my tenacity and my training and my love for athletics and my love for the red and white motivated me to do my best for everyone that came into the training room, everyone that played on every team, to do my best so that the coaches had the best players they needed to do what they needed to do every week.
By the way, to answer your question, I wrote these questions. And now another question for you. Whenever there were rough times, like rough during an important football game, what would you say to encourage your team? Yes.
Well, I can use one instance that came up every year, and that, of course, is the bell game. And I always told our kids that they should be very, very thankful that they happen to live in this district, because that means they can be a part of the greatest rivalry in the state of Colorado. And our philosophy as a coaching staff, we tried to make the bell game just as important as all our other games. Because our end result, we wanted to go to the state playoffs. But the bell game was always sitting in the middle of the year, and we wanted obviously to do well because of all the peer pressure and the alumni and everything that's associated with that. But we were just trying to make the kids be thankful that they happened to grow up in this particular district so they could be a part of that great experience. And we were fortunate enough to win a few of those games. We lost some heartbreakers, but we also made the playoffs quite a few years too. So it was a great learning experience for all these football players that participated in all those years. So I'm just happy that we were able to give that opportunity to them.
Picture. And for you, can you describe how important of a role playing a sport is in a child's life or a high school student's life?
I think athletics is a priority for as many individuals as it can possibly be. Not only does it accentuate your academic performances, it gives you a constant state of goal setting and reaching those goals. It also gives you team membership. You gain a lot of your friends that will be lifetime friends through athletics. And when you perform and you win, you always have that story to pass on. And it's always our job to pass those on. And none of that has to do with sports medicine. Sports medicine is an aspect of athletics that is provided to prevent and treat athletic injuries. So my job was to give Tom and all the other coaches of Centennial the healthiest and the strongest athletes that we possibly could. And there were times when we couldn't do that. Tom and I would talk, just for football, Tom and I would talk every Tuesday. And he would get my assessment of what players he would and wouldn't have for that following Friday or Saturday. And we would go through what I needed them to do to prepare for the next game. And then on Thursday, we would meet when I was in the training room just briefly, and he would ask, okay, who do you think is going to be ready? And we would go over who was going to be ready, who might still be ready, and who would not make it. So he always knew what his arsenal was. And that was primarily my job for him, was to give him what he had to work with. And during practices, he would have, because I wasn't here all the time, and I didn't have an assistant that was around as much as we needed. And he would carry out the rehabilitation programs in the weight room for class and then during training. And then we would talk and I would reassess them, and we would go from there on whether they could play Friday or Saturday. And it always gave him as much information as I could on what he would have available to achieve the goals that he wanted to do. Hopefully we did pretty darn good. Yeah, there were times that Tom and I didn't agree. He needed players. My job was to protect his players. So it was a negotiation. And there were times when I had to step it up and make that athlete work a little bit harder just to get ready, so that I had to work better. And I would present those players to him so that he could plan what he had for ammunition. And then when Troy took over, it was basically the same thing. When he had athletes that were injured, we in the training room, it was our responsibility to inform their parents that they had an injury, what it entailed, and then we had the opportunity to, and Tom probably could speak to this too, that we had 2 physicians that could not be paralleled in anywhere in the state. We had Dr. Gene Flum, a renowned orthopedic surgeon, and Dr. Mike Rendler. They traveled with us. They were on the sideline every week. Dr. Flum would come in and do clinic once a week. Dr. Rendler would come in every 2 weeks. And we would get a physician assessment free for every athlete that I determined needed to see either an orthopedic surgeon or family practice. And then I would pass that on to the coaches so that they could continue to prepare for their week.
And when you, there we go. When you were put into the position of head football coach in 1981, what were your first thoughts after hearing you got the job, especially since you were following in the footsteps of Coach Greaves, who would also be an assistant coach on your staff after stepping down?
That's a good question, because when I took over the program in '81, and also season '82, we finished 1-8 and 2-8. And I'm sitting after that second season and I'm thinking, what did I get into? Because I always wanted to be a head coach. And Coach Greaves was like a mentor to me because I spent 11 years with him as an assistant. And it just wasn't working out. So I sat down with my staff. But before I go any further there, after the first year, Coach Greaves was still in the building as a teacher. He came down to my office because he used my office after school to change so he could work out. And I asked him, I said, would you have any thoughts about coming back and being my assistant coach? And he looked at me like I was crazy because he just didn't expect that. And he finally got himself together and he said, I'll go home and talk to Donna. I'll let you know tomorrow. Well, he came back down the next day for his workout. He says, Coach, I thought it over. I want to be your assistant. So he was one of my assistants that second year that we were 2-8. So we all sat down as a staff. And I said, look, guys, we've got to change something, I guess. So we've got to do something different. It's not working. Every one of my assistant coaches said, don't change a thing. Stay with the philosophy that you've already started. It's going to start to pay off. So I heeded their advice. We went into 1983, had a winning season. All of a sudden, we're starting to get into the playoffs on a regular basis. 1986 comes along. We're in the Final Four. We lose to Skyline 7-0. They go in the next week, and they're the state champs. We knew we were doing the right thing at that time. Very next year, 87, we win it all. It's just the way it was. Everybody bought into the system, and we just carried it all the way through. And I was very fortunate to have the majority of my beginning staff with me throughout my career. And I consider this guy part of my staff. He was with us the whole time, and he got things done, believe me. He got my kids on that field ready to go. Did I answer it? Okay.
For you, lastly, what advice do you have for the many Bulldog athletes and students who are here with us today in the audience?
Well, 2 of my sons are sitting right there, so they'll know what I'm going to say. Don't give up, never quit. Do your best, and make your best a little better every day.
And then lastly, for you, what message would you have for your for future Bulldogs who might want to play football for Centennial, or current players as they enter the off season now, looking toward the fall 2022 season?
That's,
Questions get harder.
that's a tough question, because I've been so removed from this scene so many years. You know, my last season was 1999. And to be truthful with you, some of the things that I did as a coach that I was able to get away with, I probably couldn't even get in the door. It's just the way it was. I had my methods and what we did. I was a strict coach, and it worked. It paid off. And I know that this program here currently is not where they would like to be. But if I was here and still trying to get the job done, I would be going after every kid I could in the building, and I would talk to him on an individual basis just to see where he was as an athlete, to see if he was interested in maybe being a football player. But you gotta have the numbers. That's the only way you're gonna succeed, is you gotta have the numbers. You gotta have the freshmen feeding into the junior varsity, and the junior varsity feeding into the varsity to get things done every year. And if you don't have enough kids to fill those 3 teams, you're asking for trouble. This is still, I think, one of the largest high schools in the city, if I'm not mistaken. So there's bodies here. They just got to get them out. They got to do a good job of coaching. The kids got to do a good job of dedicating themselves to the program. And somehow they got to do some type of recruiting. I don't know what they're allowed to do nowadays about kids at other schools, or if kids want to move in before their 9th grade. It's tough, because if kids are coming in from their 9th grade, for their 9th grade, there might be another program that's been more successful. And they're thinking, maybe that's where I might want to go. So it's very tough right now. The only way it's going to succeed is somebody's got to bring it together, and they've got to put together some winning seasons just to turn it back to where it used to be. And I would love to see it. Okay? Can you do that?
I can't personally do it, but I'd like to appreciate all the words that you've said today, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Let's hear one more round of applause. Appreciate you once again. And here are your plaques. And yours. And then we have some for you guys if you want to come pick them up. We forgot to give them to you, so I'm sorry about that. Anyways, thank you, and we're going to close it off here, so thank you for being here.
What's going on?
Wait, we're going towards
Thank you, everyone who remained here today. I would like to bring up to the stage one last time Mr. Jrotc to close out this ceremony.
Thank you all for coming and helping us celebrate the induction of these amazing Hall of Fame Bulldogs. As I said before, they serve as a clear exemplar of what it means to be a Bulldog. Let's give them one more round of applause. As a reminder, So all of the Hall of Fame recipients and their families will have a reception for you in the museum following this assembly. Also, the Hall of Fame dinner tonight that begins at 5 p.m. at the Union Depot. And I would like to thank and recognize our inductees. Thank you for being lifelong Bulldogs and sharing it with the future generation of Bulldogs. This concludes our assembly. Students, you may report to 4th hour, please. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah.